Hi, I'm Liam McCann from Central FM, the programme controller and breakfast presenter, and I'm going to be chatting to Alistair McPhee today about how CueAndReview helped me get the first step in the ladder on my radio career.
Q Talks with Liz Bailey. Our access to audio programmes are sponsored by Impact Funding Partners, the RS McDonald Charitable Trust and the Suter Charitable Trust. To find out more about how to access our services, visit CueAndReview.com or email aaatl@CueAndReview.com. This programme was produced and presented by our Access to Audio Ambassador team leader, Liz Bailey, and edited by our Recruitment Training Officer, Alistair McPhee. Welcome to another edition of Q Talks, presented from the CueAndReview virtual studios by myself, Alistair McPhee, standing in for Liz Bailey, who's still off at the moment. Today I'm joined from the Central FM studios in Stirling by Liam McCann, their programme controller, and breakfast presenter. Welcome, Liam.
Hello, Alistair. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us today. How were you first involved in CueAndReview? Bearing in mind you're what I term these days one of our old boys.
I know this is going to make me feel a wee bit older than I obviously my youthful looks would make me appear. Yeah, I think I must have been 16. And basically, long story short, my mum had got particularly fed up with me sitting in my wee bedroom studio in my house, and my mum and dad's playing with my decks, my microphones. And she wanted me to get out and start earning some money and getting some experience. So thankfully, I went along to my careers office, and very glad that this happened. But your charity appeared on the list of potential places that I could go, and I earned a very modest £60 a week to do a full-time role with you guys. Although we did get a Friday off at that point. I do remember we get the Friday off, so it wasn't too bad.
Exactly.
And for that, I used to walk up and down to Bishop Briggs, and I really enjoyed it. And it was a really good start off, and it was a great social thing as well to start working with lots of different volunteers from all different walks of life, and most importantly, getting all that valuable presenting and editing experience as well.
Well, you were one of our shining lights, and that most definitely you then went off and you took every opportunity you possibly could to get the experience from everyone and anyone. And at one point you actually came back, and we're talking about the virtual studio that I'm sitting in. The photograph behind me, you're actually responsible for us going down the Myriad studio route, the broadcast ready studio.
Yeah, well, that was when I came back second time around, so that was a wee bit later on. And at that time, I think I was presenting at West FM in Ayrshire as well, and plus working with you guys on your funding applications. And obviously, one of the big parts of my job at that point was to help oversee the redevelopment of the studios. And I can see that the red, lovely red walls are still lasting the test of time.
Well, that's the Hessian. We still occasionally put pins in them and whatnot, but the Hessian covered studios and the soundproofed, the acoustic walls that we've got up behind us, they're still there and they're still very much used. But one of the things that you hinted at there was that it was an employment program that you were with us on, and we had various internships, etc. at that point. Do you think that internships and employment programs such as Community Jobs Scotland are a good way for young people to get experience in broadcasting?
For broadcasting, honestly, it's all about experience for me, and I say this to most people. We get so many people emailing asking to come in and do work experience, and it's so much. It's the best way of getting stuff, and that obviously that's just work experience. But if you're actually getting paid to do it as well, even if it's not a 100% full time wage, but for me it was. I mean, I was getting £60 a week, but it meant that I could come in for 6 months, really develop on, particularly that age, first time round, my social skills and. Working some really big projects. I mean, we had some really big clients at the time. If you remember, like the likes of Intelligent Finance at the time, who were a big, massive national company. We used to work for them, and it means that when I'm actually working with some real high level clients now in my commercial role, that all that stuff back then really stood me good stead for what I'm doing now and really helped me. And that's the thing. Yes, there's some really good media and radio courses out there, and you can go and do them, and they are good courses. But for me, nothing will ever replace that kind of on-job experience.
Am I right? When you were actually told when you went to the college, was it you that was told by the college that to actually go away because you knew more than the lecturer?
I don't think it was quite as harsh as that, but it was certainly a lot of the courses at that entry level we'd already kind of dealt with a lot of the things in our day-to-day at Q and Review. So it was almost like, I would have been just wasting a wee bit of time. There obviously is some much bigger high-level degree courses for media students to go on, and I'm pretty sure things will have evolved massively now, particularly with the digital media world we live in now, those courses. But at that time, experience was the best thing, and that's the case now. Like, you could probably learn a lot by being somewhere on an apprenticeship or a job scheme for a month or two, compared to all those months and months and months of theory in front of, no doubt, some really great lecturers as well. But there's nothing that beats that on-the-job experience.
In fact, you were generous enough to provide an internship to one of our trainees a few years on from yourself, who actually came in to be the tea boy with yourself, and I think at one point you ended up at STV.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's it. And don't get me wrong, I did learn how to make a good cup of tea at Q and Review as well. Just ask Morag. And I still hold my tea making skills in a very high regard. I'm very proud of my tea making skills. But no, Conrad, Jeff. So we used to do a Saturday afternoon football show at Central FM with Peter and Ruffy, who are now doing their own thing on PLZ Soccer, which is a great show as well on their YouTube channel. But at the time, Conrad came in, so I used to pick him up on the way to the studios on a Saturday, and he would come in and help out. And again, that show, I can't even tell you the pace that show ran at. It was 100 miles an hour. We had 6 commentary feeds running from all different football stadiums. Conrad would sit next door in the other studio. He would help edit the audio as it came in, get it ready for on air, whereas I would drive the show in the main studio. And that was 4 or 5 hours of real high-level experience working with some really talented broadcasters, well-known pundits, and I'm pretty sure those Saturdays would have really helped grow him as well as a media professional.
I know from being in touch with him that he's always really appreciative of the chances he got. But I think that's the thing, that you basically were a sponge. You soaked up all the knowledge you could possibly get. You then you paid back by doing that with Conrad. Hopefully Conrad will do that again with people in the future. But I think that's part of things like Community Jobs Scotland and the other training programs that the government offers. It's a good way for people to get a chance to get involved. And I think from our perspective, I think one of the other things that's been extremely helpful is we've been sponges, that where people have at Q and Review, we're a sponge. We're quite happy to soak up other people's knowledge. And you actually introduced us to the British Wireless Fund for the Blind nearly, I think it's actually more than 10 years ago now, when you introduced us to BWBF. And then it was just round about the time they were launching the internet radio players. I mean, how did you go about introducing that and being an audio ambassador and becoming aware of services to blind people other than just doing it on cassette? How did you find that?
Well, it's I'm pretty sure now it's the technology it's even better now. But I mean, at that point, it was very much it was very, very new. I mean, and I had to do a lot of research as well at the time with those internet players. They all worked on scripts. I think it was XML from memory. It was like a new technology for me to learn as well. And those players at that time were, I thought, fantastic. In fact, ahead of their time in many ways, as we live in.
It was plugging them into the internet and basically suddenly being able to access radio from all over the world. Yep. Including Scottish radio stations. And I believe in the early days we could also access Aboriginal radio from Australia for some weird and wonderful reason. But but again, you were the one who actually encouraged us down that route. You basically said, I won't be indelicate, because I think you kind of joined us before that in the days of reel-to-reel and steam-driven tape recorders.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as I've kind of sit somewhere in the middle, and I've been lucky enough to work with all the old analog technology, but obviously I'm very much a digital media person
man
these days. Yeah.
Well, certainly when
bit of both.
Young Liam, when he was with us, I'm only joking about your age and steam driven and all the rest of it. It was you who actually encouraged us down the digital route. We've been doing things like one magazine a week or a couple of magazines a week at the most. You were the one who basically said to us, let's go day to day. Let's look at doing a daily service. There is the BWBF. Sonata radios. It gives us the chance to offer a day-to-day service, a daily service. And it was you that basically introduced us to them. So it was a major change about 10 years ago. And basically internet radio for us became the BWBF player. But of course now they've moved on. They've now got the Talking Newspaper app. So we've moved on from having to have a special player in your home to having it on your mobile phone. I'm not going to embarrass you and ask you to prove you've got the app on your phone, because you'll probably get your Central FM app, which is far more important these days. But but basically you can listen to the Herald and all of our papers on the app. But basically you were the one who started us down that route.
I think it's even more important now to really embrace online audio. And if you can just look online, if you have a scroll through social media, the amount of content that's been pushed out now in podcast format, and the podcast has now become a thing. I mean, back then podcasts were a thing, and that was actually that device at the time was very much a podcast based system, and those were little mini podcasts almost that were getting pushed out at that time. And podcasting are a huge thing. People are making lots of money off of podcasts, through advertising and different things like that. So it was very much ahead of the curve even then.
Are you still doing radio as an ongoing live show, or are you also looking now into doing sort of podcasting type of programming? Or how are you approaching the lockdown and the changes and the different ways of media at the moment?
It's everything now. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are still first and foremost a radio station. We're live most of the day. We've got live news journalists, we've got a live breakfast show, drive time. Our mid-morning show at the moment's from home, but it's still a presenter who's in there every day doing that show. And that's, again, just a safety issue with COVID, just to try and reduce the number of bodies using the studios at any one time. We've all got separate studios on the breakfast show, for example. We've made a few changes in terms of the content we're putting out there. We're still very much the traditional analog FM digital radio as well on DAB. You can get us out right across central Scotland. Online, our app is really popular. Our online at-home listening, for example, is skyrocketed. I think we're like 40% up year on year on online listening.
Wow.
So that's including things like your Alexas and your Google Homes, people using those methods of listening now as opposed to other methods. But I think the one big thing for us, it's not even just audio, it's the amount of video content we're having to provide. We're having to do much more on the fly news content straight onto the timeline. Whereas before, traditionally in news, you would sit and beaver away for 55 minutes getting your next 0:00 bulletin ready. If something happens in our area now, it's on our social channels within the minutes. Like yesterday, for example, there was a car ended up on the rails at Stirling train station.
Saw that, yeah.
So, I mean, literally within a minute or so we were on that, and that was on our social media, and our journalist was round there getting content for that. So it was so quick. So it's everything now. It's really everything.
And the journalist has now been expected to not only be, gather the news, they're expected to do the audio and the video themselves. Is that the case?
Yeah, and that's the thing. People get into radio thinking they can hide behind the microphone in a nice wee cosy studio, and myself included. Whereas now we're having to put cameras in front of people's faces. And you have to think about maybe shaving a bit more often in my case, or things like that.
So the old adage about having the perfect face for radio is no longer the case.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, if you look around the industry, particularly, and I'm not saying that's the only reason they're employed in these stations, but if you look at the big national brands in commercial radio, there's not many bad-looking folk working in radio these days.
Yeah. So again, basically, for Central, I mean, you're adapting as an independent radio station in the purest sense of the words.
Yeah, I think we're the last remaining. We're the last remaining
Scotland,
independent. Yeah.
And basically, you've had to adapt. You're going down all the new routes. But what do you see the future holding? How do you see Central's future in particular? How do you see the future of audio and radio?
We're still, I mean, certainly my future still thinks about delivering great radio to people, but more and more now, the content needs to be coming on top of that. So I think for us, we need to look at now things like on demand. How can people listen to any show at any time? Can we get more specialist shows on the schedule? Can we maybe get some more appointment listenership going on? So can we bring in maybe some specialist presenters to come in and do stuff at the weekends and then make their shows available as podcasts? We do things with Will Feel Ready on a Sunday, for example. He's got a very very well put together retro chart show, so it's like almost like an old school chart rundown that he does on a Sunday morning. Very much, how we remember chart shows maybe being when we used to sit and tape them and pretend we were on the radio, and that's the kind of stuff I did as a kid. So he does that. So maybe more things like that, more on demand. Audio is probably where our future is going to have to move soon, because we do get lots of requests now. Can I listen back to 3 o'clock on Wednesday because X person was on, and I want to hear it again? Obviously, big groups and big corporations like the BBC have got all the infrastructure and the financial muscle to make these things happen. At our level, there's big costs associated with that kind of technology and licensing issues and things. So, but it is probably somewhere we're going to end up eventually soon.
Fantastic. Well, how do people get in touch with Central FM? How do we listen to you? How do we, if we're not actually in the central area, are we able to listen to you online? Where's the website? Can we phone you still?
We've got all bases covered. Online? Yes, we've got. In fact, I know them off by heart. If you want to phone the studio, 0330 838 1031. But yeah, we do. We have loads of ways that people get in touch now. In fact, one of my favourite things that we did over lockdown on the Breakfast Show is we got the listeners involved, and this just happened on the fly in the morning. We've got the Central FM app on Apple and Android, which is free. You can download that. It's got the message function, which means you can also send in content. So you can actually send us graphics and video and great. So great. And even little voice notes as well. So one of the mornings we made a Dua Lipa remix when we all get thrust into lockdown. And she has a song. It's the lyrics basically go, "I should have stayed at home." So we remixed the song around that with all the listeners sending in their own lyrics and own lines to the song, and remixed it into a kind of Central FM lockdown special. So we were basically asking the listeners, what lockdown phrases have you started using over and over and over again? Like, oh, I'm bored. So we took all these little key phrases and remixed it into a track. And I think that's where the world is now. They want those nice little bits of content. Radio 1, for example, are massive at it. I mean, if you look at the Greg James Breakfast Show, their online content is absolutely phenomenal. And that's where it's all about taking that audio content, visualizing it, put it onto social media, and then getting another layer of audience that way.
So basically, you're having to compete with a national radio station, but on a local level. But there's actually obviously an advantage to doing that, because I would have thought that people are interested in hearing about what's going on in their area. Mm-hmm. So again, doing that is probably going to be a good thing for your station, adapting in that way.
Yeah, so we try and we're still 100% locals first and foremost. Forth Valley's still our core area and core patch, but you can still listen, as you say, though, online. You can get us all around the world. We get people emailing the Breakfast Show in the morning who listen in Australia, because they used to live in Falkirk. Yeah. But they say they listen to us almost like their evening show, and they enjoy the banter and they enjoy the fun. They're sitting chilling maybe with a beer or whatever, and they send in an email for wee birthday shout-outs and things. So very much, we're very much worldwide now, and I say we're still on FM, we're on digital radio, we're on all the apps, we're on Alexa, Amazon. You can say play Central FM, and it'll do it for you. So we've got all the bases covered.
Well, I think CueAndReview is kind of similar in that we panicked a wee while ago when we suddenly discovered, when we looked at the stats on the BWBF player, and realised we'd more listeners in Saudi Arabia than we did in Eastern Bartonshire. And because Eastern Bartonshire has a habit, they're a bit traditional because it's iBean. So our listeners in Eastern Bartonshire wanted it on USB stick. Thank God they've moved on from cassette. But we actually had more listeners in Riyadh to the Glasgow Herald than we did in Eastern Bartonshire. So that was a major problem for us. However, can I thank you very much, Liam, for being one of the CueAndReview old boys. You are still looking as young as you ever did, youngster, especially when you're sitting next to me. But can I thank you very much for all your service and keeping in touch with CueAndReview and keeping promoting what we do. We will send you your virtual certificate as an audio ambassador. We'll get that across to you. But you don't get any Ferrero Rocher, unfortunately. We're too cheap for that. So you get your paper certificate. But thank you very much for all your time, and thank you for joining us in Q Talks.
Yep, thanks to you guys as well for giving me my big puddy up when I was at that wee age of 16 as well. It's very important for my career. Thanks very much.
Q Talks with Liz Bailey. Our access to audio programmes are sponsored by Impact Funding Partners, the R.S. McDonald Charitable Trust and the Suter Charitable Trust. To find out more about how to access our services, visit CueAndReview.com or email aaatl@CueAndReview.com. This programme was produced and presented by our Access to Audio Ambassador team leader, Liz Bailey, and edited by our Recruitment Training Officer, Alistair McPhee.